Welcome, 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 everybody. I am delighted to be back with another In My Being Human series, where today I'm super excited because I get the opportunity to have a good old jam with Isik Tlabar. Isik is an empowerment coach and breathwork facilitator, activating people's power and purpose. She's a real soul sister in this work because she also has a big investment in sexuality and embodiment through conscious sexuality, which we'll come to later. Ishik began meditating at the age of 8 and personal development at age 14. She's always had a curious, courageous, open, and loving heart. I see myself that way too. And she's previously been involved in psychology, creative development, shadow work, energy work, alchemy, shamanic practices, sacred sexuality, and conscious kink. And I know some of you will be asking, what is that? So I imagine that we'll come to that as well. Now, this is where for me it gets really interesting as well, because Ishik was born and raised in Istanbul in Turkey, where women have a particular place within the culture and society traditionally. And again, we're going to be talking about that. She studied architecture before dedicating herself to her true business of empowering individuals as leaders, coaches, and visionaries to live from their soul. So Ishik now has founded and trademarked something called Naked Breathwork, which is where we began to connect because I noticed in myself an initial reaction to that. So again, we're going to cover that in today's interview. And she leads many breathwork and dance journeys at Mind Body Spirit festivals, How the Light Gets In, Latitude Festival, and other places all around the UK and internationally. You can find Ishik on Instagram at Isik Tlabar, and we'll put that in the links below this interview. And I'll also link to her website, which is also under her name. Ishik, after that fantastic welcome, thanks for being with me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for such a great introduction. That was great.
Well, there's so much to talk about, and I feel that here we have the freedom. It's on my channel, and there's a lot of stuff that I'd like to cover because this series, Being Human, is all about people overcoming challenges in life to, if you like, turn their souls gifts into their work in the world. And from that bio that we've just read out, that's exactly what you've done. So let's start by backtracking a little bit. You grew up in Istanbul in Turkey in a culture that's very different to the one that you live in now. Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit more about what that was like for you and how that formed you?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Turkish. I'm from Istanbul, and I'm an only child. I grew up in the city, and I was really blessed to have a mom. She's a therapist, and she's into breath work, meditation, yoga, and all these practices that connects us to ourselves. So I grew up around that. Often people might have an awakening after a divorce or losing a job. Like I didn't have that. I was naturally available, witnessing these practices, doing it. Um, and the culture in Turkey, I from a very young age I could feel things. I could feel people's energies. I could see through what people were saying. I could feel the energy behind their words. And I found it a bit hard to navigate reality, I would say, in a way other people weren't like that. So there was a lot of mind stuff, like logic was more important around me, and intellectual, and all these things that was not my natural way of being. I work with intuition. I move through the world through following truth and intuition. So I created my own world in a way. I created my own like daydreamy land, and was very creative and imaginative. Um, and like I feel really privileged. I grew up with so much privilege, which I'm so thankful for. Um, and yeah, so I had access to all of that. And part of being in a Turkish society, growing up as a girl, as a woman, I could see how um, there was a lot of more emphasis on more the masculine, and more like men were much more listened to, and they were leading more. And I was a bit confused, almost like seeing that and going, wow, like women's ideas and women's way of being is almost in the back. It's not in the forefront. like for example, in Turkey, in Istanbul, what happens is you go out, like men sit at the front in the car, even like women are at the back. And I forgot about this. And I only realized it again when I visited a year ago. I was like, oh, because I was actually going to the front and they were like, there was this unspoken agreement of like, you go to the back. And I'm like, oh, you know? So things like that where it's subtle, but it's there. Istanbul, Turkey is it's kind of in between, I would say, Western world and Eastern world, like literally in the middle as well. So it's really a combination of the culture where there's a lot of community, there's a lot of support, I would say. Community, family is so important. And there's pros to that, cons to that, where sometimes there's not much boundaries. Boundaries don't really exist in Turkey, in my experience of it. So in some ways I didn't feel that free, growing up and expressing myself, being myself. There was all these rules, how a woman should be, how a girl should be. I was curious about sexuality, and whenever I spoke about sexuality, it would look like I'm a slut, like you're talking about sex, you're a slut. And being a teenager, I quickly realized, wow, pleasure is like for men, and you serve men as a woman. So that was a bit weird for me to like get on board. Um, yeah, I feel like I could go on. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm hearing already, that on the one hand you say there's no boundaries, and then on the other hand there's these very clear kind of tacit agreements of, the hierarchies around gender, particularly
Mm,
within the culture that you grew up in. And, most of us at some point during puberty and often earlier start to develop awareness of pleasure that, oh, okay, when I touch myself or when something is in contact with me, that feels pleasurable. Not that we necessarily label it as pleasure at that point, it's very much a feeling. Oh, that's nice. So there's an innocence. And as you say, you bring those things forward and then suddenly you're being labeled.
mm,
You've made this realization as well that you've moved from out of that culture now into a different culture. You now live in the West, and that when you go back, to realize that something as innocent as going to sit in the front of a taxi could be like, or a car is like, what are you doing? Wow. Wow,
mm,
it still plays out that there's this dominant power. And I like that you've already acknowledged, by the way, the privileges that you had as well, because I'm aware, as a white
mm,
cisgendered woman who's been educated, that I have privileges within my society that some people don't have. And there are things that I've had to fight for, and there are places, as I'm sure there are with you, where we've definitely felt disempowered. How does it feel for you now when you go back to Turkey and there are still those kind of responses and reactions, given that you're now in such a different world?
mm. It's an ongoing process. I would say it's uh it's really good for me to go back regularly as well, like every year, twice a year, sometimes three times a year, because it's so easy for someone to go. I moved here when I was 19. I'm 30 now. To be okay, cool. That was that. Now new beginning, which in a way that's what I did, to really explore myself, find out who I am, and to really open myself up to a whole different way of being. Like, let me explore this fully. And for the last few years now, it's been about integrating both, integrating my roots,
Mm,
because when we run away from something, going like fuck this, that is going to hold power, that's going to hold incredible amounts of like almost shadow, and you're running away from it. So I see the importance of going back and like owning my roots, loving it. It can be challenging, and it requires me to be brave and to actually stand and hold who I am, and not to look like a slip back into that pattern
mm,
of such ingrained roles, I would say. And people naturally live that way because it's almost like systematic. You're in it, you're not realizing what you're doing unless you get out of it.
mm.
So yeah, it's an interesting process, and every time I go back I see something different and new, and um yeah.
Yeah, I can really hear, that I've had two conversations just in the last week, one only yesterday actually, about the places that we run away from. And my
Mm,
friend was saying, he now lives in Hong Kong, and he said at the time that he was leaving things behind, he thought he was running towards something, running towards his dreams. I did the same when I went to live in France. And then somebody called me out on it in a family constellations workshop. And I was suddenly like, oh, the flush of shame. It was like, and the realization, oh my God, I've been trying to run away. And in my case, it was kind of like that English, kind of 2.1 family structure of like compliance and hierarchy and everything else. And it's like when we realize that there is a reclamation to be done, but as you say, and you point to the fact that that has required courage from you
mm,
because you are not that person anymore. And I want to make a bridge in a minute to come to, how you go from Turkish culture, you left 11 years ago, but also like architecture and maybe following a traditional path to end up being somebody who's heavily invested in conscious sexuality, embodiment, conscious kink, and naked breathwork. Wow. Give us the bridge. Where's the bridge?
yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah. I love that you said about family constellation. That's where I realized it too. And that's where I saw the facilitator helped me see I draw my strength from my roots and my home is England. So there's that balance. Um yeah, the bridge. So I chose architecture because like it's it's a job like medicine, doctor, lawyer, but it also has some artistic expression in it. There's creativity in it. There's design, there's art. Like it's there's a lot that's in architecture actually. There's photography, there's sculpture and many things. So after studying it, even towards the end of it, I could just feel this is not me. I felt like a fish trying to fly or a bird trying to swim. Like this is not my natural arena. Even the simplest task everyone else was doing, I wasn't able to do it. And I just felt so like, what's wrong with me? Like, why can I not do this? There was nothing wrong with me. I was just in the wrong container. I was just in the wrong like situation that's not really made for me. So after that, moving to London, um, that's when I started to open myself into, I found ecstatic dance, I found tantra, I found five rhythms, like all these embodiment cacao ceremony. I went to my first cacao ceremony, and it started to really open me up to myself more, like my own knowing. Like I started to come back to myself, and back then, and sometimes it still comes up as part of my ego, not trusting myself, not trusting my own knowing, and asking everyone else what I should do. But actually, when I come back to me, I always know, and we always know. So I start to really strengthen that voice, and after a year or so, I start to see, you know what, I want to help people. This is what I naturally do. Even when studying architecture, I was going around the studio asking people, hey, how are you doing? Like, can I help you? Do you want a massage? Like, I just wanted to help. So we do what we're naturally good at anyway. It's not like something we find going out into the outer space, like it's inside of us. So I start to really listen and go, okay, I want to do coaching. Like I want to actually set up my own coaching business. So I got qualified, and during that time I started to hold workshops for women, and they were including meditation, dance, and breathwork. Breathwork was in my life for the last 12 years. And I studied with different modalities, and I started to hold these workshops. And the more I did them, then I started to do separate breathwork journeys, and I kept doing them for the last 5 years. And in that process, sexuality was always there. So I started with more tantra, light tantra, sacred sexuality, had sessions, had one-to-one sessions for 1 year. And that was my deep healing. That was deep, deep, deep releasing shame, releasing just this voice, even like I'm enjoying myself, my body, and this voice going like, you're not allowed to enjoy this. Like you're a woman, what are you doing? And all these judgmental voices. So, and I remember the person who helped me, he would say, instead of listening to the noise in your head, listen to the music of your body. And
Lovely.
that really stayed with me. And I was like, unless I'm not hurting anyone, this is beautiful thing. Why am I even feeling guilty? So there was a lot to let go, which I
Yeah.
did for that 1 year. Explored Tantra more, went to a Tantra festival in London. I just started to go into that community more. I did a training called Ista. Was in a really deep, beautiful relationship where I built my business together, and he really helped me, and he's one of my best friends now. Then I got into conscious kink around maybe 2-3 years ago. So the way, like, as I look through my journey, I always go, okay, I want to do this now, I'm going to go for it. Like, I just go all in. I learned through experimenting, through exploring myself and having the experience, because that makes me feel I've done it, I've gone through it. Now I have the integrity to actually teach someone else. I'm not talking from knowledge. Like, I've lived it, and I feel you. And I think it's felt like people sense that, like, oh yeah, you've gone here, and you can support me as well.
Yeah.
And kink was very healing as well. Very healing, very helped me to integrate different parts of me that I might not even able to own. Like, oh wow, I have that side that that is not acceptable in society, but here's a safe space. I can explore this, I can enjoy this. It helped me become more me. It almost allowed me to integrate parts of me I might have pushed aside. And last year, if I go on, yeah.
No, you can continue. I've got a few questions coming up, but you
Yeah.
carry on. Last year.
Last year, 2 years ago, I qualified as a sexological body worker. So that was a piece where I had my personal journey with sexuality, and it got to a point of like, I actually want to hold space around this as well, because this is such a, my work is all about empowering women, empowering people to be themselves, really. And if we don't include the sexuality piece, we're just dismissing a whole, big part of us. So as I went through that qualification, I was feeling into how can I incorporate this to my existing work? And the idea came to me, naked breathwork. Why don't I do breathwork naked? And it's such a simple thing. It's such a simple, you just remove clothes, but it really allows you to go way deeper, and so healing for the body image. Sexual trauma can come up to be healed. And that felt like the piece, the connection I made through the sexuality journey I went on, the training I got, with what I was already doing, to, yes, actually, this is what I'm birthing into the world.
It's beautiful to hear that, and there's a couple of things that I want to come back to for people who might be listening, because something that I think is important, and I think many people are compromising that sense of who they are in the world according to other people's expectations, or perhaps their own, where you describe that description you gave of being a bird who's trying to swim or a fish who's trying to fly was so perfect, because there'll be people listening to this who know that they're not in right relationship with their spirit and soul's longings, who know that they're not aligned to what they really want to bring forward. So the first thing I wanted to ask you about that is, how did you begin to know? Was it an embodied sense? Was it an aha? What was the difference in your knowing of the true expression of who you are as it came through your awareness in your body?
It was when I started to learn about the difference between what's ego, what's truth. That really helped me see reality in a whole different way, because I could see, oh, that's a story, that's what I was taught, that's other people's opinions, that's what the world says, that's what the society says. What is my truth? And for that, I actually have a very simple tool where I close my eyes and I just acknowledge my thoughts and feelings. I acknowledge my ego, and I just imagine rising above it. I imagine seeing it from this higher perspective, and I ask, what's my truth? So that simple exercise of asking the truth and following it. So when I get an answer from my intuition, acting on it, so that my intuition starts to strengthen and go, oh, you're listening, you're paying attention to me, I'm going to talk to you more. And it felt like when I acted on it, it felt right. Like in my body, it felt like, oh, like this feels, it's like puzzle pieces coming together. Like it just fits. It fits. This feels good. This feels true, and not good in a way of you're running away from something and you're, you know, staying in the comfort zone and it feels good, but it feels good in a, it feels right. Like a duck landing on a water and like, oh my God, I can swim. I can like pedal my legs and go. It's like, that's your natural environment. And I start to feel that in the people I was hanging around with. The When I went to ecstatic dance, first time I went, I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, these people are dancing like they're drunk, but they're not. Like, how is this even possible? Because I was used to, I would drink to feel confident, to feel good in my body, to then dance, on nights out. But seeing that, I was like, wow, this is not needed. So it was about when I exposed myself to all these different communities and found the piece that I connected with, it did something to me where, wow, this, I can be more me here. So for me, community really helped. Community and the activities that feels aligned, that feels true.
Yeah.
And I feel like this takes a bit of a trial and error, like trial and error in like find that, okay, that didn't work, move on, moving fast, like take what you need and leave the rest. That is often my like things around communities, like I'm gonna take what I need and leave the rest. Yeah, and the more I had that feeling of like this feels home, this feels true, then it strengthens. It's like a muscle that you
Mm.
have access to, like a reference point, and you can go there again. And you only need maybe 3 of those reference points, and after that, it's just like exponentially easy
Mm.
to come back to them.
Yeah, I think contrast, like you say, exploring different environments. You might never have come across that, oh my God, these people are moving in this way without any substances, and it isn't for, the attraction of a mate. It's just for the joy of dancing. But we don't know what it is that might be really calling to our spirits and souls if we don't have the opportunity to go into those places, which can be an edge for people. It can require courage to even take yourselves there. I never forget my first 5 rhythm session. I spent almost the entire session, this is like 22 years ago now, trying to get out of the door without being seen because I was just like, this is really weird. What are they doing? And honestly, it's been one of the most healing journeys of my life. So I really relate to that. I'm also hearing as you speak that you're kind of tuning into your intuition more. And I'm wondering, do you feel it in your body when there's something that's in a right alignment for you as well?
Mm, yeah, I feel there's a groundedness that comes. Like I feel way more grounded when something is aligned. It's like I feel more in my body, basically, instead of like being out and distracted, or instead of going with other people's paces or their rhythms. Like I'm actually following what is my pace, what is my rhythm. But there's this deeper connection with my body that also happens. And when that's there, you naturally know your truth more because you're actually connected to yourself. It's like a ripple effect that you have that inner connection first that can ripple out to the choices you're making in life. So yeah, 100%.
I'm curious, Ishik, whether this growing exploration of sexuality through naked breathwork, through conscious kink, through sexological bodywork, has that created any problems or tensions within your family system if your parents are still quite conventional? I don't know if they are, they might not be, but how's that
Mm.
been?
That's an ongoing journey. So around the time when I first set up my business, this was 2017, I was, and I still am, but back then I was sharing a lot more. I was always sharing my personal journey, what was happening, what I was going through, but always in a way of, I would always ask myself, is this serving? If it's serving, I'm going to share. I'm not going to just share like blah, like just. So I remember posting a post with my partner at the time. We're naked and we have my period blood on our faces. So just we painted our faces, and I wrote a post about how sacred our blood is. And that was edgy for me to post. And I'm so grateful that my partner was, at the time, he was comfortable with that, always honoring the feminine and womanhood. And I could see, like, this needs to be seen. This is like a message, and it sometimes like taboo topics like that requires radical like movements like that. So I shared that, and it created a fair bit of tension between like, me and my parents. And it was difficult for me, difficult for them too, because I can understand them. They're coming from their point of view, living in Turkey, in that reality and what that does. And I'm here all about following my truth. And it's not for the sake of my truth, it's the truth to empower women, the truth to change things. So I had to, stand my ground. And it happened a few more times as well. Whenever I shared something maybe taboo or slightly sexual, that almost tension was there. And it was a little bit more there when I was doing my sexological bodywork training as well. Fear around like, oh my God, like you've already shared very out there things, like where is this going kind of thing. It's a fine balance, I would say, fine balance of following myself, my truth, and also having empathy and love for where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And right now we've come to a point of much more harmony, I would say. We had our journey, a fair bit of journey, which I'm not going to go into, but it did require me to, put some boundaries and actually do things that are not usually done in a Turkish family dynamics. To really get out of that and to focus on my mission. Actually, am I going to focus on the drama of what is happening here, or am I actually going to focus on what I'm here for, whilst at the same time honoring my roots and loving my family? So it can be tricky.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask that is because again, there's going to be people listening who are feeling callings to certain things, and it might not be anything quite as radical as that or as taboo as that, but just that really powerful pressure of approval and belonging, which is kind of at the root of every human being's nervous system, the desire to belong. It's very, very primal. I was listening to a podcast last night by a man who teaches mindset. The podcast was The Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett, and I really like it. And the man he's talking to is talking about chimp brain, the kind of instinctive things that come in that where it can feel very threatening to do things that mean that you are cast out of belonging, that you're cast out of the pack, the tribe, the society, and that often is still running in us on a very deep level. So I really admire your courage, and I'm really hearing about your love and respect for your family and your understanding of the fact that there's a cognitive dissonance that's there because that isn't in their world, it isn't in their range of experience, so it's really challenging. And I love that you have all managed to find the ways to start navigating these conversations. So just to move away from that a little bit and to acknowledge that, we were talking just before we came on about consent in practice, which I think is something that is so, so, so important, especially, I mean, it's important in breath work, and that's been coming into the conversation and dialogue in the mainstream recently, big time. But it's especially important when, no, is this true? I say this and I go, okay, clothes on, clothes off, there are breaches, because sexuality has so many distortions in it in the world out there. It's really the big theatre of our shadow, our drama, our guilt, our fear, our shame, everything. So when you work with naked breathwork, what's your motivation for doing that? And how do you navigate issues of true consent, where people feel empowered to make those choices rather than making the choices because they think they're going to be judged for not being open enough to do it?
Yeah. So my intention in holding naked breathwork, creating it, is to create a space where we can be all of ourselves, create a space where we can reclaim our full power and we can be in our full expression. So in a way, I found clothes on, it's limiting in some way. Like our true expression, we were born naked. So why not go back to like kids being naked? It's not necessarily sexual. It's just free and innocent in a way. It's pure. So there was that. And the way I navigate the consent piece and nudity, in the beginning of the workshop, we have an opening circle, and I guide something called conscious undressing ritual. And I guide people to really tune into their bodies and listen to their bodies. And I always say this, you don't have to get naked just because it's called naked breathwork. You can do the whole thing with your clothes on. That's all good. And I guide them to bring their awareness to something they want to let go of. And if it's a yes to remove an item of clothing, we all do it together. We do maybe 3-4 rounds, and we witness each other in that space, which often feels really sacred, really beautiful, really uncomfortable, and vulnerable as well for some. And in that, people might share a word or two, words like sacred, beautiful, judgment, self-conscious, shame, and just witnessing those energies, just being in that space of, I'm naked and I don't want people to see me, yet I am being seen, and here are the things that are coming up, and just acknowledging those. That in itself is so healing. That in itself instantly creates this like this relaxation and relief almost. It starts to already fall away. And then we go into the breathwork journey. And in the opening circle, I ask, who doesn't want touch? So people, raise their hand. And I say to them, we might do energy work, body work on you. What it might look like is, let's say there's a hand on your belly. We're going to say, I'm going to touch your hand on your belly. So they know it's not like this hand coming from nowhere. There's a hand on the belly. And I give them the option. You can hold the hand. You can hold the hand, put it, maybe you need it on your heart, or you can push the hand away. Because whenever I personally attended breathwork journeys, I didn't enjoy. There was this random hand coming on me and doing things on my body. Like I actually wanted the movement and expression come from me. Like if you're going to support me with what's already there. Don't come with your idea of what I think you should do. It's like,
so important.
Yeah, so important. And like I always tell them, like, you can shake, you can dance, you can sing, and we are here to support you. And so many people gave this feedback, like, wow, this is actually one of the few breathwork I attended where you didn't have your own agenda. You just let us be. Like, yeah, because it's a space where you get to experience this. And if you have this reference point, you're going to go out in life and you're going to be more of yourself. So I'm not going to come with my agenda because you know you better. Well, I'm just here to maybe, if you're feeling stuck, maybe make a sound or a movement, some suggestions. And I say, if what we're suggesting is going against you, ignore us. Like, don't even like try to go, like this is for you. So there's that. And I always say you can remove more clothing, or you can put more clothing after starting. And people always say this, by the end of it, it feels so normal to be naked. Even putting clothes back on feels weird. It's like, why have I ever, like, it's so natural. So it almost, someone else said, like, oh yeah, I even forgot that we were doing this naked. It felt like I had like it was just normal. So I also love that too. It normalizes being naked. Doesn't mean we're going to go out naked all the time now, like normal life, but I think it creates a ripple effect. It does create this shame, or like drops the shame around body, how we look, and that influences our sexuality as well. It influences how we see ourselves in the world and show up. So I think it gives freedom. It creates more freedom.
Yeah, I mean, we've grown up in cultures, differently, Turkey to UK, but speaking for myself, growing up in a culture where you might feel as though you have more freedom, but there's a huge amount of pressure on how a woman should look and how a body should look. Particularly from my perspective now, awareness of aging and women's bodies aging and the kind of redundancy that can be there. It's like, oh, you're not fertile anymore, so I'm going to go and look over here. Or, oh, lines and soft parts and changes in our body shape. So I'm really hearing that, this capacity to start early on becoming comfortable with nakedness and nudity is a way to really drop some of those shackles. Because I mean, I know women who've been married for 20 years who are still not comfortable being naked in front of their partner, who will want the lights off, or they'll want to be under the covers. And I honor that, that is where they are. But also it's kind of, there's a grieving for these ideals that we've been given. about how we should
Mm,
feel and how we should look. So I love the liberation that you're bringing in. And I'd also want to say, I love this, like you say, that we are there to support the process of the person who's come to the breathing session. And we have to have a strong frame to lay out the boundaries. For example, okay, you're on a mat, you might be near to somebody, there might be some emotion that comes up, you might start crying. How do you deal with that? I presume in the same way you do with any breath work, where it's not somebody else's job to then reach out and pacify or
mm,
touch without consent.
yeah, and absolutely. In that, I always say, if you're someone who naturally helps people and there's someone next to you, let's say crying, or like you feel that they need support, bring your energy back to yourself. You breathe in. This is your journey, and that person's powerful and they can experience that. And if they need support, they will raise their hand as well. So I make it clear that everyone's on their yoga mat too. It's not like going around dancing around naked. There's a boundary. This is where you're at. Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned to you at the beginning of this call, that after all these years in my own work, which has taken me through a lot of adventuring through sexuality and then the reclaiming of my boundaries, which had been breached so many times, sometimes by other people and sometimes by my own kind of misinformed agreement, if you like, not the true art of consent. But I started this training, Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent training, recently because I wanted to know more. And I'm aware of the power dynamics within cultures, the systemic ones that you mentioned at the beginning of this, the individual ones, the power dynamics in relationship, the power dynamics between a space holder or a teacher and a client or a student. And it's like, there's so much more to learn here. And just from that one 10-minute video of Betty Martin explaining about personal domains, personal accountability and responsibility, somebody else's domain, the boundary at the edge, the longings that we might have, and what happens when we don't know how to take responsibility for those, or when we're afraid. It was like, of course, we start projecting them into somebody else's domain. And
Mm,
then we make up a story. And you talked about stories and you talked about projections at the beginning of this. So I think consent it's so much more than, do you agree or not agree? Do you want this or not want this? There's so many layers to it.
mm,
So
mm,
I'm curious also to know, have you seen an evolution in your own work around consent in practice, given that you are leading quite cutting edge aspects of breathwork here, or conscious sexuality?
Yes. So 100% I agree on how there's so much more to consent. There's the verbal consent, verbal agreement. There's also energetic consent. So maybe it's not spoken, but it's just there. And I find that it doesn't always have to be related to touch. Maybe, let's say you're having a conversation with someone and you just start to notice they're talking at you. So
Mm.
you start to allow and they start to take. They start to take your attention, but but you also feel, so maybe you might feeling they're crossing your boundary. So this was something I often did. Like people would just talk, and like I love listening. I love people. I love listening, but it sort of got to a point of like I didn't quite agree to this. Like this is becoming a bit. So what I start to do is actually notice this, hold my own boundary, not allow, and hey, like actually I'm gonna pause you there. I've noticed I'm losing presence, and could we pause this conversation? Could we continue another time? And that's okay too. So it took me a long time to even do this. Because again, like as a woman, like, oh, I need to listen. I need to like be this nice person who, holds space. And it's like, no, dude, I'm done here. So in my own practice with the consent, um, I would say I start to own my power more. So I start to actually be a bit more direct and be a bit more clear. So not like the energetic holding, I start to be much more clean and clear, because I start to be much more cleaner and cleaner in myself. And I'm also very mindful of who I pick to be on the team. I see it as
Mm.
almost like imagine when you go to like Fantastic Four, like superhero movies, everyone has a superpower. So when I pick the team, like everyone has their specific superpower and they're very different. And because they're different, it's so much better. Like everyone can really shine. in their truth and power. And what I do with every team member, I have a call with them every time. First time someone assists me, I have a call with them and I take them through this consent, like energetic. You approach someone mindful of their energy space. You don't just go and like touch them. And then, so I give them a bit of a breakdown of like that energetic spatial like understanding, so that it's not just me holding that piece, but the whole team as well. And I think it's really felt in the space, like people feel super safe. Because there can be this shadow aspect of the space holder of like, I know better, like, you know, I'm the powerful one, I'm gonna give you this thing and look how amazing I am with what I'm doing. It's not about us, it's about the service. So it's so important to have that cleanliness of the intention.
Yeah.
And I have an energy healer I work with, he also does shadow work, and he always keeps me in tune, in check, so that I'm not projecting, that I'm not coming into my practice with my own personal needs. Like that has its own space, so my practice is clean and it's in integrity. So I think it's really important for us as space holders to have that support, so that we can show up in truth, like in integrity.
Yeah, I'm very drawn. I'll be at one of your Naked Breathworks before long. I'm
Mm-hmm.
absolutely sure of that because I feel as though, I mean, I grew up in the 60s and 70s and things were very, very different then. I consider myself to be fairly free in my body, and comfortable in my body, but I'm aware of these little subtle moments that come in that still aren't that. And even when I contemplated lying down naked on a mat and breathing in a space, I have a friend in Slovakia who runs naked yoga, and I was a bit like, oh, I'm not sure that I could go there. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, Steph. What's that about? What's your vision for your future as we come into these final moments, like with this work? What really lights you up and inspires you?
Mm. What really lights me up is women following their truth, like people following their truth, being themselves, being their full expression, being their, it's like ding ding ding, like lights lighting up when it's like, imagine someone maybe like black and white and they turn into color and they're shining bright in who they are. They're living their
Mhm.
greatness and their expression. So when I have a session with someone, for example, a coaching session, and I can see their journey and like shining and blossoming, being more of themselves, like that just is like it makes me so happy. And I see that in the end of Naked Breathwork journeys and the women's empowerment journeys I do. There are many books I want to write. They're all inside me at the moment. And there's one I'm writing about things I wish I knew when I was 14. It's for young girls, teenage girls. Includes like parents, family, school, like boys, future, because there's not much support really. And it's a TikTok series as well. So I'm turning that into a book. And yeah, just to um, bring more truth into the world, I would say.
I love that. I really love that because I feel that, and again, it was a YouTube interview I was listening to yesterday. It was actually a YouTube interview about reversal of gender reassignment for
Mm.
a person who had gone for gender reassignment at the age of 12 and the kind of complexities around puberty, what they'd experienced, what they were experiencing now. So that piece that you bring in, because I'm not going to get into that story right now because it's complex, but the piece that you bring in, which I think is the important piece, is that as teenagers, boys and girls, but let's focus on the girls because you're talking about that for the moment, is like there's so much that we don't know. And you're absolutely right, there's so little support. There's so little support around positive approaches to menstruation and bleeds and embodiment and empowerment, and yet there's so much of the other stuff that says this is how you should look, this is how you should behave, this is what you should be doing, depending on your cultural and personal points of reference. So I'm really glad to hear that you're doing that. I'd love to know more about that TikTok series. And I suppose my final question in this, because I also think it's an important one given what's coming up, is do you think there's anything that you would like to say to people to alert them to any kind of breaches of those pieces about consent and boundaries within sessions like this? And it doesn't necessarily have to be naked breathwork. It could be in any breathwork session or in any somatic sexuality session or anything else. What are the things that people should watch out for?
It's a great question. So one thing, I think it's fair to ask what's going to happen. Like, I'd like to know what's going to happen. So this is something I learned from conscious kink. Like, it creates safety when we know what's going to happen. We can actually relax into it. So asking for that, to know what's going to happen. If it's not clear, clarifying it. Hey, just to clarify, what happens after this? Like, how do we start? How do we end? If touch is involved, asking for the touch. Like, actually, I don't want to be touched around my neck. I don't want this sort of touch, but this kind of touch is okay. When you're going to touch me, will you tell me, or how would I know? Clarifying, like, what's the point of contact of the touch? So does it just come, or do I ask for it,
Mm-hmm.
And just, I would say, also trusting yourself, like trusting yourself around, if something feels off or weird, it probably is.
Yeah.
And you can point that out and say, hey, and even that can feel edgy. I feel a bit weird about this. Can we clarify this or explore this? Because it can go against people pleasing. It can go against, like, here's a person doing their thing. Maybe I don't want to make them look bad, or I don't want to, like, the caretaking. Sometimes that can happen. Like, the client almost goes into caretaking of the person, which is like, that's not what they're there for. So I would say, trusting yourself. If something's off, sharing that, and pause. Pause is often a good thing. Pause. If in doubt, pause, feel into it, breathe, and then communicating that.
Beautiful. I really hear there that it is the empowerment comes in the voice and through the voice, through knowing that we can trust ourselves to say what is going to happen. I think that's a fantastic question, and it's one that's not asked often enough, in my opinion. It really isn't. It's like our nervous systems need to be able to feel that sense of settling so that we know where we are with things, especially if we are going towards a place that feels much more vulnerable for
Yeah.
us, a place that is unfamiliar to us, because tremendous growth can happen from going to those places. Tremendous growth. You know that. I know that. And we need to feel that, because not all practices, practitioners, and situations have that awareness or are walking in integrity. So thank you for the clarity that you brought that in with. Thank you,
And
Isik, for this. Go ahead. You wanted to say something
I
else?
want to add something on the safety. It's
Okay.
yes, going into those places to explore whilst we have our inner safety. Because once we have our inner safety, we can really go into any environment and be safe. So it's also about finding that out. What makes me feel safe? What groundings I need to have in place so that I can go into this experience that I've never had before, so that we don't lose ourselves in that. Which is okay to do that too. I've just made lots of mistakes and I learned from it, and now I know what safety for me is. That I find is also great to know, and also ask for it. This is what I need to feel safe. Do you think you can provide that?
Yeah, we definitely learn from the times when we haven't done things or haven't known things, or
Yeah.
where there's been
Best
a shadow
lessons.
aspect that's come out. Absolutely, my friend has this post-it note. I mentioned it in my last YouTube interview. My friend has a post-it note in front of her desk that says something good will come of this. And I love the simplicity of that no matter what we're experiencing, ultimately, when we have composted, digested, excreted what wasn't useful or helpful, and integrated what was, something good will come of this.
Definitely.
So, ending
Mm.
there, Ishik, I just want to thank you so much for coming and chatting
Mm.
with me again. I honestly feel like this is a topic that we could just take any one of those pieces that we've talked about and really expand them. So, thank you for being able to
Mm.
summarize it, and let's keep chatting.
Yay. Thanks so much for having me. I love talking to you and I hope you all enjoyed this conversation as well.
Yay! Thank you, everyone.
Yay. Thank
We
you.
will be live
Bye.
soon with this. Keep an eye out, and Ishik's links will be posted below this interview. Thank